welcome everybody. It's May 7th here, obviously. It's live. The recording will be up hopefully within 24 hours. Before I kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it all, let's just do your bog standard news, disclaimers, right? There will be blue sky statements. We're not your financial advisors, right? So just be aware of all those things. This is kind of entertainment purposes only. But, all that out of the way, I'm excited here. I've got Claudia Tornquist and Chris Taylor here from Kodiak Copper, and they're here to provide a little bit of context and color. We're sitting kind of in between 2 points here, right? You've got the 2023 drill campaign in review, and then no news release as of yet, but still they're going to do their best to maybe provide some information on the 2024 drill campaign in preview as well, right? So Claudia and Chris, yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for being here. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for having us. It's great to be here and have a conversation.
I'm doing great, Matthew, and it's nice to see you again. I think last time I saw you at the floor of the PDAC conference, right?
That's right. Yeah, Nancy dragged me in there, and I got to come hobnob with y'all, so that was good. No, and I guess I will share my screen right now. I do have some visuals, nothing too groundbreaking for people. I just snagged some visuals from their last few news releases, and can someone just confirm for me once more? You can see that I've got some videos up here or some images.
Yep, I can see them.
Okay, perfect. So
no, vaguely familiar. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no one wants to see us anyway, right? So I mean, honestly, right? So I mean, the news, you kind of had your final news release come out here in the last week or two in terms of your 2023 work at MPD. I guess Claudia, just want to, I mean, just to set the table for people, right? We read the news releases. We've kept up with this over the last few months as the drill results came out. But can you just, before I ask you any specific or pointed questions, just give a general overview to get the conversation started, right? If you can walk us through the program briefly, even just in terms of where you drilled, how much, the meterage, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to. Last year was an important year for Kodiak. We executed a big drill program, in total just over 18,500 meters. And it was important because after 2 years of drilling primarily at the gate zone, our initial high-grade discovery, last year was the year where we really stepped out beyond the gate zone and drilled 5 new targets that we hadn't drilled before, with the aim to really show that MPD is not just about the gate zone, but that we actually have mineralized zones across the whole property, that we do have a large system. So we tested 5 targets, the west, south, and 15-16 zone in the southern part of our property, and Man and Fire in the northern part of our property. And we were successful at 4 of them, and were able to significantly extend mineralization, had some nice high-grade zones, mineralization right from surface, or the nice high grades right from surface. And so now, after last year's program, the project looks rather different from what it was before. A year ago, it was really mainly the gate zone, and we have now demonstrated that we have multiple kilometer scale zones of mineralization on the property, and also with nice high grades in them.
Yeah, and I think if I may just interject here or take it from here, I mean, I think sometimes the euphemism of a technical success sometimes occurs where people, the companies try to hide failure and coach in that terms and that language. And I mean, you certainly did have some, based on neighboring projects, some economic mineralization grades, right? And of course, that's the ultimate kind of forward-looking statement. But there are also times where maybe the grades weren't what people were expecting or hoping for. But again, my point though is that there was absolutely legitimate and valid technical successes, and not just that sort of, like I say, euphemistic use of that language. But maybe, I guess, and Chris, I'll pass this over to you if you don't mind. Do you just want to discuss, maybe working from there, successes and struggles, right? Which parts would you hold up as things that, you'd be banging the drum to be proud of in terms of what happened? And then maybe, in terms of areas where kind of more work is needed, and then also areas where maybe this was plain old struggles. Chris, if I'll let you take that one.
Oh boy, it's a good line of questioning, actually, Matthew, and it comes down in my mind to having worked on projects like this in this belt before. Like, I used to work at the Mount Poly mine back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. I went back into production in 2005 after my boss there, Pat McCandless, made the discovery of a high grade zone. That's really with these alkalic porphyry deposits along the Quesnel Belt, which is the belt of rocks in BC where we find ourselves with MPD, there's always large sort of lower grade porphyry systems, and these do work as mines. Like you see this in production all over the belt, but it's really nice to find these higher grade zones as well. But as part of the exploration process, you can't just drill the high grade. You have to do the exploration work that hits all the targets and actually test the targets sort of from top to the proverbial bottom. And that means, Kodiak does a lot of holes that are, say, a kilometer long. What we're really looking for within that is the higher grade zones within the kilometer long hole. Like I could take a kilometer long hole and I could drill it at Red Chris, or I could drill it at Mount Poly, or I could drill it at Copper Mountain. And in most of those cases, the hole won't be high grade over the entire kilometer. I know of ways to do that. For instance, at Red Chris, if you drill directly down the center of the system, we would have that capability at Gate Zone by drilling directly down dip on it as well, like I've seen in the past. But what we do is basically put a hole in, you see a really big system, and then you look for the high grade. And what really got me excited this past year at MPD with Kodiak is that we saw higher grade mineralization up in the near surface. So in terms of challenges, our challenge is that we have a lot of porphyry targets on this project. The project is like 20 kilometers long. You can see it on the map in front of you there. It really covers two volcanic complexes that are a couple 100 million years old, roughly. And you can see in these complexes, there's multiple porphyry copper gold, in some cases, copper gold moly targets that are basically developed at these things. So it's a big area to test. There's a multitude of targets. And what we have is historical data that shows that we have nice mineralization in several zones. But once we found the Gate Zone, it was really a game changer for Kodiak because it had high grade mineralization as well. And it reminds me of that situation where there was that transformative event for us at Mount Poly back in 2005, made the high grade copper gold discovery. And we did the same thing here. So the challenge is really communication, I think. If you're in Kodiak's shoes and you put out news releases that have kilometer long, on the average, low grade copper intercepts that might be similar to your neighbors, that's fine. So it's great to see that you have a really big system. But understand that even if we drill a kilometer long hole, we're focused on the higher grades within it. And in our case, what really was successful was finding those higher grades in the near surface on a number of these targets now. So scale and presence of higher grades.
And so I want to discuss individual drill holes, right, in terms of the good and the not so good, I guess, right, so to speak. But maybe just because I think I'll scroll through here to the assay table and just you see the final bullet point there. Just 11 additional holes did not reach target depth, had no significant assays, or did not warrant assaying at this time. And so I guess maybe you don't want to discuss, because of my understanding was there was some struggles, especially in the south zone, in terms of kind of reaching target and actually drawing assays, right? I mean, can you, and Claudia, do you want to just discuss what were the struggles there a little bit?
Well, I think it's quite normal in a drill program that you have successful holes and then you have holes that either don't hit the right zone or holes where you try to get into the bedrock and the rock is just difficult and the conditions are difficult and you struggle and you just never get there. So you always get those. So we're not worried about it. We're very, very happy with the drill company we're working with, Atlas. They've been really fantastic. And I look at the holes that didn't work out as a just normal part of the process. And the ones that did work out, that's the important ones. And we had quite a few of those.
I'll add on to that too, Matthew. Like some of the holes, like you could be in the middle of a mineralized zone, and if the hole goes down a dike, there's always post-mineral dikes in all these porphyry systems because they get different pulses of magma at different times. Sometimes it happens, and I've seen this here before, that you put a hole in and it's surrounded by mineralization, but you go down like a late phase monzonite dike, and then you don't have mineralization because you've been lucky enough to go down the 5 meter wide or 10 meter wide dike, which is basically post-mineral. Or in our case, because it is, all of these deposits in this belt, they're all chopped up a bit by later offset structures. And if you happen to be within a structure, the rock is broken up and then you lose the hole. So most of the holes that we didn't have mineralization in were simply holes that we couldn't get to drill through some of these like fault structures. And then you get through the fault structure and lo and behold, you're in the mineralized zone. So that does eat up meters. It's one of the things you have to deal with when you're dealing with, this age of deposits, basically.
And yeah, I guess maybe that's the follow-up question I'm curious about. I mean, just in terms of kind of, learning about drilling and drilling 101 for people. I mean, what, the fault structures are classic issues or where, your rig can fail on. How do you rectify that? What's the solution there?
Generally, you move the drill hole. So you'll figure out where the big faults are based on geophysics. A lot of the time, you have a pretty good idea where they are. And then, the way it goes in BC now for permitting is you have to, in advance, pick the specific drill pads that you're going to do the drilling from. And you have to do that before you really know the lay of the land. So it may be the case that we have drill pads that are on target where we're not exactly sure what the underlying geology is. Some of the pads are in the right place and they hit the mineralization right away. Other ones happen to be sitting on top of a fault zone or something else, which is interfering with the drill hole being successful. Then you've got to move the drill pad and basically start it fresh. And that happens all the time.
Mm. Yeah, no, thank you. And Claudia, so Chris mentioned this, that big long stretches of mineralization that are highlighted then by the higher grade pockets that are within it. So hole 18 at MPD South here, I think I've got it up here. So, I mean, 525 meters, nice big long stretch of mineralization. But, it came back at 0.09 copper equivalent. So obviously, I mean, I think especially in this market, kind of grade is what really starts to push things, is what really the market responds to. I believe in your news release, pardon me, that that you discussed how this 0.09, that you believe you're on the edge of a porphyry in the mineralized halo of it, right? And then of course now your job is to vector in, and then of course theoretically you start to discover increasing grades through further drilling, I guess. And let's get a little technical here, and Claudia, and I'll let you start. But what can you just give us the geological cues that you have to support this thesis, right? How do you know you're on the kind of the mineralized halo of a higher grade core versus it just simply being a low grade porphyry system?
Yeah, let me start out, and I'm sure Chris can add a lot to this question as well when it comes to porphyries and zonation. But the bigger picture and why we are very excited about this entire zone is that what was previously thought of as small individual shallow zones from previous drilling, the south zone, mid zone, added zone, our thesis was that this is actually one large zone, one large system that all hangs together. That's what our drilling was aimed at establishing. And we drilled from the south zone towards the mid zone and essentially got a kilometer-long hole, all porphyry mineralization, and we're able to show that the mid zone and the south zone are not two distinct small pods of mineralization, but they are part of a larger system. And looking at the map that you just have up there, all the pink that you see on the plan map, that is a surface anomaly that overlays all of these targets. And that, together with some historic geophysics, tells us that this is likely one large system. And so very exciting target to test further. We initially thought of these three zones on the western part of this complex as one zone. That's the added mid and south zone. And then on the other side of the valley, 1516, we hadn't initially thought of the same system, but drilled that last year. And that was the hole you referred to, where we had our first drill hole into the lower grade envelope of a porphyry system. And when we looked at that drill core, the rocks were the same as the one on the other side of the valley, same core chemistry. And that tells us, together with the surface anomaly that really spans the entire surface, that we're likely looking at one large system that encompasses all these zones. And that is exciting because the size of this, the length is almost 2.5 kilometers. So that is multiple times the gate zone. This is a really big system. And so it's exciting to have some drilling success there. And particularly at the south zone, we already had some nice higher grades as well. So made a good start, but there are still many more low-hanging exploration fruit to really drill this system more and add to it.
And I'll jump in there, Matthew. I mean, when you drill a hole like this one, I forget the whole appellation on it. I can't really read it. I think AX 2318. So again, like Claudia mentioned, it's a big target. It's part of really a 3 kilometer long by 2 kilometer wide, a really big target that contains a south zone and all that. But I knew when we got the assays back from that one that there'd be hell to pay about a hole like that, because that's the textbook example of a technical success drill hole where we're excited by what we see with the rock type and the alteration. And the thing is, it really reminds me of what led to the Gate Zone discovery. And the Gate Zone discovery had similar sort of poorly mineralized holes right beside it. And then you moved over 100 meters and you were in incredibly high grades, and it was a game changer for the company. So that hole there, it had segments of drill core in it, which are absolutely indistinguishable from some of the high grade mineralization that we've drilled elsewhere. What it is not is exactly in the right place. So when you're dealing with a kilometer or 2.5 kilometer long target, and you've only got a few holes at the very end of the season to throw into it, you really just have to, close one eye and hope for the best, because you don't have an X-ray vision into the subsurface. But we did that sleuth work initially with the geochemistry, geophysics, some of the historic prospecting in that area, and we did manage to hit part of a big porphyry system. So the question that we have here is, how big is the total system? And it's looking more and more, like Claudia alluded to as we do the work, that this is something that's like 3 kilometers long by 2 kilometers wide with multiple targets within it. And so far, everywhere that we've drilled, we've got copper mineralization. So it's showing the really the scale potential on that target. Are we excited about the grade in this particular hole? No, obviously not. But we are excited by the potential to repeat what we've done before, which is follow up around it and hit where the actual grade will be concentrated.
No, good, thank you. And that's the sort of question and response I was hoping for. Maybe as a quick follow up, Chris, just back to you. I mean, you have this nice little dotted line, like you say, kind of egg shaped oval, 3 kilometers in size, where you kind of included added mid, south, and 1516. And again, maybe a little technical, just to help people do their due diligence. I want to do their own research as they go. I mean, you've expressed confidence that this is all one complex. Yeah, can you just provide hard evidence to support that? I mean, I think you already touched on it a little bit, but maybe I'll ask that as a standalone question as well.
For sure. I mean, Claudia even alluded to it. It's the same rocks. When we drill the holes, they're the same. So we see that, which is dead giveaway as a geologist, first ones you go to. The next one is geochemically. There's similar signatures here. Now, up to the north, where we've got the Gate Zone, those are more like classic alkalic porphyry textures. So there you go. It's kind of copper gold. With the southern stuff here, it's more like these types of systems tend to be more copper gold moly, a little bit more silica saturated, and it's a little bit different. But all of these systems in the south part of the project look like they have the same sort of geological and geochemical signatures. So I believe they're all part of the same quite large porphyry system. And remember, like a very big mine in this area would have a pit that's maybe a few hundred meters long, right? So you're dealing with something that's, it's definitely like an order of magnitude bigger than what we really expected when we got involved. And now we're seeing that everywhere we drill within that copper in soil anomaly, we're seeing the right rocks, and we're seeing varying levels of copper mineralization too. So it does look like it's part of a big target. And there's no way that you can properly define a target like that with just a few holes. Over the long term, it'll need systematic drilling. Over the short term, which we believe would benefit our shareholders, is to concentrate on the areas that we believe have high grade in the near surface, or higher grades in the near surface. And those are the kind of numbers I think we would all like to see coming out of the project. We saw them last year. Like, we've got some, numbers that would probably surprise people, because when I hear about the project from others, one of the comments that kind of, it's a pet peeve of mine, is they say, "Oh, we know you're hitting copper, but we know it's all deep." But like last year we put out numbers, and I wrote down a few of them so I wouldn't, I'd have them like in front of my fingertips. But we drilled last year at the West Zone. It was right from bedrock surface. It was 1.17% copper over 39 meters within 0.38% copper over 200 meters, and that's right from bedrock surface. Like, these are great numbers from a BC perspective, where the cutoff grades on these operational mines are 0.13. in our neighboring projects. I mean, these are multiples over those grades, right? So we're very happy to see those kind of results. They're shallow and they're good grades. So we saw that at the West Zone. We saw good grades in the first drilling at the Man Zone. It was 0.34% copper over 116 meters. And then we saw South Zone again, which was largely dismissed as a low-grade target. Right from the surface, we had 0.31% copper over 234 meters. Like that would be a very good drill hole if you put it in the middle of Red Chris, right? So, and then you have examples of companies that have been taken over in the district, like GT Gold. I think their global resource was about a 0.28 or something like that. So it shows you that, in line with projects that have been acquired for quite a bit more money, certainly a lot more money than our current market cap is, we see, kind of systems that look like what we're approaching here in terms of work. And we certainly have elements in terms of high grade in the near surface that a lot of our neighbors would be envious of having. So that's what makes us excited about the project. It really does have that sort of scale potential. And it looks to me like it would be one of these projects where if it progresses further along that development pathway, it has that potential for multiple sort of open pits in different areas. And certainly maybe a combination of that and underground at something like the Gate Zone, which certainly has very, very nice grades.
No, excellent. And I mean, on the topic of grades, and Claudia, I'll pass this one off to you. Drill hole AXE 2315, which let me see if I can find it here. Drill hole AXE 2315. It was 13 meters. So I'll just quote from the news release here. Assayed 0.43% copper and 659 grams per ton silver between 36 and 49 meters depth. Not a bad little hit there. However, the interval recovered only 25% of the core, and this result is assumed to represent a narrow, near-surface, high-grade vein of unknown width. And of course, that will be followed up with, of course. But I mean, that's such a surprising outlier to me. And Claudia, I mean, how do you explain that? I mean, how does this fit into your current model? I mean, how does this kind of defy your working thesis, your working model? How does it confirm it? Is this, I mean, it is actually right here. It's up here somewhere, right there. You can see if you can see my mouse cursor. I mean, how does this fit in with your working model? I guess, right? And maybe as a follow-up, what do the elevated levels of silver tell you about the system potentially, and where you are and what's going on?
Yep. Well, that was certainly a nice sniff of higher grades, and elevated precious metals in that drill hole. As you said, it had very low core recovery. It was really chopped up rock, and so we only got 25% of the rock out. That obviously then makes the result a lot more hard to interpret, because you don't know what was in the rest of the 75%. And we didn't have similar results in other drill holes around it. So it's a nice and interesting sniff, but at this time, I think that's how I would look at it. I wouldn't give it too much significance, because really to show that there are these high grades present, we need more results than just one single hole that in addition had poor core recoveries. But it's a good start, and looking for more high grades. That's what the name of the game is in this system.
Well, I'm going to add to this. You can see me virtually vibrating in my seat when you first. So within porphyry systems like this, there's always generally late fluid pulses, and some of these we'd call intermediate sulfidation veins. They tend to be high in precious metals. So they're base metal rich, but they're also precious metal rich. It's one of the signatures you definitely look for when you're drilling a new area. You want to see these sort of multi-phase mineralization signatures and these higher grade targets. I've drilled these before. There was a project called Trapper that we had for a while where we were drilling some of these late intermediate sulfidation veins, and they were precious metal rich. And it's a signature you want to see in porphyry deposits. It's another indication that when you're drilling a new area like this 1516 zone, the fact that you've got these as well does mean that you have a porphyry system developed in that area. So it's just more evidence that those sort of things are present here. And, honestly, there's always swarms of these things around porphyry deposits. Sometimes they form viable targets of their own. And some of the zones that we've looked at, like West Zone, is quite rich in gold. There are actually historical work on the project, which isn't too many years ago, about a decade ago, was looking at it primarily as a gold target, because we put out other results, which were, I think, 17 meters of, I think it was about 1% copper and a gram gold. But we had in that zone, in the west zone, there was multiple, I would interpret them as structurally controlled late mineralization overprints, like what you're probably looking at here at 1516. But in that case, at the west zone, these were like 5 grams gold, 10 grams gold, something in that range. So you can get like 10 grams, you've got a third of an ounce of gold sitting in a late structural feature. I mean, if I was doing a gold only exploration project, those would be very, very exciting hits. The point is, on the back of the total porphyry potential on a project like MPD, it's a relatively minor target, but it's an important enriching element within these zones. It's nice to see that the precious metals come through, especially in the case of gold. Extraction circuits can be optimized to take quite a bit of the gold out too at these porphyries, and that's why porphyries are one of the dominant sources of gold mineralization produced in the world, right?
Yeah, and so I mean, we've kind of reached a midpoint here where I just wanted to ask some questions around how 2023 went. Obviously, the market seems to think it was a disappointing set of results. I mean, I like I say again, forward-looking statement to be clear here, right? But you look at neighboring projects and the grades that have come up from a lot of your holes. The copper equivalent grades match those, right? And so maybe it's not it's not 50 meters of 2% where people are going to be knocking down the door and wow, but there's a lot of still very, very kind of important work being done here, and kind of pieces being put in place, and like even the 525 of 0.09, as you both said, right? The ultimate in terms of actual technical success, where let's 12 months from now we'll have the same conversation and see what the follow-up holes, now that you've got that chance to vector, will tell us, right? But I guess I'll let you. I'll do my transition here, and if you two have any final thoughts on 2023, please jump back. But I thought maybe we could jump into talking about 2024. Generally speaking, just because it is no news release as of yet. I know that that's kind of coming soon, is my understanding. But I had questions around Verify and other things of that nature. But I guess maybe same thing, Claudia. Just general overview of what we can expect in 2024, just to kind of set the table for this conversation.
Yes, well, we're looking forward to getting to work again, and just getting ready to do so. We'll announce more detailed plans soon, but it's safe to expect that we'll do another substantial drill program this year. Given the markets, equity markets that are very poor and capital very expensive, I think you're probably looking at something slightly more conservative than in previous years. I don't think it would serve our shareholders best to make this the most aggressive of all years in this market climate. So yeah, I think we will have a substantial, significant drill program. And just looking at the work we did last year, that foreshadows already a number of interesting targets for follow-up work, the low-hanging fruit type targets, where we have a very high probability, I believe, of success. And so, yeah, really looking forward to get going with the drill rig again this year.
Yeah, sure. And so maybe, and Chris, if you want, we'll pass it off to you, Chris, if you want from here. But let's talk about Verify, right? I know that this is a conversation I'm sure you've had many times, right? I know with Crux and others as well, right? And I mean, like you kind of referenced, I mean, we had the chat at PDAC itself, but I mean, I guess just some questions for people, and this is just for my own edification as well, kind of, right? This is why I like this job. But I mean, how much of this Verify AI, how much of it is kind of proprietary black box work that just spits out results, and versus how much do you get to kind of see behind the curtain in terms of how it does its job?
Well, it's a very iterative and collaborative approach with our own geologists, like Jeff Ward and Dave Skelton have been heavily involved with the Verify team, basically looking at every time we get output from the model, we end up having input from us that goes back in and helps us sort of educate the machine learning algorithms, more or less. So it's an integration of black box, and I'm going to use that in air quotes, black box techniques that these guys have taught the machine based on other projects, and data specific to this project as well. So when you see the targets that are generated on the map, they change over time. So as we educate the machine about which geology and which alteration signatures, which geophysics is most tightly correlated to the mineralization, you'll see different targets both get stronger and wane in some cases. So what I've seen is multiple iterations now go through this process. And it's amazing, though. It's going to be a very powerful tool. And I know without naming names, the majors that I know in the industry are developing these techniques internally. So basically, they have members of their geophysical, geochemical groups, their data modelers, and they're developing their own machine learning techniques so that they can determine, really what to basically build their own software version of what we're looking at here with Verify. So it's not a fringe application that is just being used by junior companies like us. These are tools that are going to be used across the industry in the next upcoming years. And I think there'll be some surprises that emerge from that work. Like with us, because the project is 20 kilometers long and it has so many different targets, this is really prioritization. We want to be able to go out there and we want to be able to use this together with our own observations to figure out where we get the most bang for our buck on the exploration side. And I can talk about this forever if you want me to, but one of the more interesting things about these AI methods is that, it's less people think that the AI is just going to spit out like a ranked output, like drill target 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, this kind of stuff. It doesn't quite do that. What it does is generate target interests that might be the same as yours, or it might be different, but it won't really differentiate between something like, in our case, we have Dillard, which is one of the porphyry centers, which is really big and relatively low grade, and it's on surface. So, I mean, the AI model is like, oh, we really like this area because, we see it and it's really big. So it'll give you a really high priority there, where something like Gate Zone, which is actually much higher grade, but is a little bit deeper, will still be highlighted as a target. But you have to use the information that the AI gives you, because it's going to give you targets, and it's always up to your geologist to filter which ones you think are going to be the highest priority. So it's useful in the fact that it's giving an independent review of the project, really through unbiased eyes in that sense. And then you have to filter what it's doing. You have to add a bit of bias back in, Matthew. Look, it's like you got to add a little bit of common sense back so that you can control those outputs and really make sure that you're staying on point. Quite fascinating for us on the Verify side. It's highlighted a number of new targets that we think are quite exciting. And what's really good for us is it also highlighted targets that we liked before we started using it. So, and these were areas that we have high-grade copper samples coming to surface and no drill holes. We had geophysics saying there was a target. We had soil geochem saying there was a target. And we even started last year to get high-grade rock samples saying there was a target. And they've never been drilled. So the AI is not using the same data that it has for our other zones. And yet it's still coming up and highlighting these as viable targets. So it's showing you that there is value there for sure.
Well, and I think, when we were speaking in our little group there at PDAC, Claudia and Chris, that was something that I said. I mean, machine learning, AI, the latest buzz topic, can be misused for nefarious purposes by certain members of certain markets, right? But I think this is honestly just the kind of ideal, pitch perfect ideal application for it, right? Just deep, dense data collection collation, which I think, as you so kind of aptly put it, Chris, still relies on that human touch, which I guess was a follow-up question. I think you kind of answered this, but I mean, I guess, Claudia, do you want to discuss, I mean, how much, in terms of, and Chris kind of referenced that this is an inherent part of it, but that potential for kind of human input and tweaking, right? I mean, how much can you go back and correct the AI model, and how much does it rely on kind of the human element for it to help guide it too?
Well, it's really a tool that superpowers our team's capability of evaluating data. That's how I would look at it. One of our director actually called it superpowered light table or something. Essentially, what the AI does, it takes all the information, all the different data sets, and in some areas, we have, for particular areas of the property, 30 plus different types of data: geological, geophysical, geochemical, all sorts of different data. And it does what a human geologist does, it looks for patterns and it looks for anomalies and correlations, but does so much more efficiently than a human brain could. Like as a human, you can maybe look for correlations between 3, 4, 5 different sets of data, but not for 30 or 40. And so what it spits out is all these potential areas of interest, and then gives us also very detailed information why a particular target is an area of interest. It would tell us, for example, it's this particular IP frequency, it's those elements in the soils, etc., that contribute to this target being a target. And so with that information, we can then look at each target and apply judgment and say, look, yeah, this makes sense. This is a target, and others it might not. And so it's really the selection and the picking and the prioritization at the end that's really our judgment. But the AI informs it, and that's very, very valuable. What's also really valuable is just the efficiency that it gets you. Like if you look back at our exploration work, we identified every year 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe new targets. We have a massive big property, and our team goes out, prospects, maps, takes samples, and out of that, we generate new targets, areas that could be potentially mineralized. And so that's a very sequential process. Now with the AI, this software is able to chew through this data so much more efficiently, and we have a large number of potential targets now and are able to look at those all simultaneously. And that is very, very valuable because we have them now on our table and can prioritize and pick the best ones first. Whereas had we done it the pedestrian way, we might have come across the best targets only in year 2 or 3, sometime down the road. So to have all these potential targets right away, because the AI is able to chew through this huge amount of data very efficiently, that's incredibly valuable and will, in the end, accelerate exploration, will bring down costs and just make the whole process much more efficient. That's sort of my prediction for the future. I really believe that AI will make in exploration a huge impact, as it does in many other industries, because at the end of the day, exploration is all about massive data and probabilities. And that's where AI is really good.
I'm going to echo what Claudia said, and I think you're going to divide the exploration techniques into the it's like before we had computers widely, we do everything on paper. And I've done this myself. I used to draw on plastic sheets, and then you hang the plastic sheets up in a kind of an open-sided box, and you could you could build up a model of what you were drilling in 3 dimensions, and everybody would sit around it. We'd all drink coffee, and it would be fascinating, and we'd love to do it. But within a couple of years, we were building 3D models in computers that were orders of magnitude more sophisticated. You could rotate them in 3 dimensions while you were working on them. You could update them more efficiently, and it really modernized and revolutionized the exploration space. You ended up with programs like Leapfrog, which came out several years ago now, but has been instrumental in companies saving lots of money for shareholders and making new discoveries because they're able to image all that data. Well, the AI is going to be like the next leap on top of that. And I think the magnitude of leap will be similar from going pre-3D modeling to post-3D modeling. It'll be similar, going 3D modeling digitally to this powerful tool once it's ready. And just keep in mind that I used an analogy early today. I was in another meeting, and I said it's a little bit though like building the airplane while you're flying it. So it kind of makes me laugh because the machine learning is going on while you're working on a project. In a few years to come, you're going to have a massive database of other projects that these things have been trained on, and you're going to be able to select alteration facies and deposit types and everything else. But we're building as we go. So it's very, very early days with AI. And for some companies, it will be a very powerful tool right now. For others, it's going to be a few years until they can use the applications. But you can't put this genie back in the bottle. It's like when you come home at night and your kid is using ChatGPT to do their homework. That didn't happen a few years ago, and everybody's coping with that now. So this is a new world we're embarking on here.
No, good. And I think I have, I'll transition just to talk about 2024 exploration, pardon me, in general, knowing, of course, that no news release means I can't ask you material questions. I might pop back over to Verify just for a follow-up question. But I guess, Claudia, I mean, what is your priority, right? I'll just skip back to, I mean, here it is, right? I mean, plan map showing 24 target areas. Like you said yourself, Claudia, a very iterative process. I believe at the start of 2023, we had 18. Now you're up to 24. New targets identified in 23 are highlighted in yellow. 23 soil survey grids are outlined in green, right? And then the IP survey is outlined in blue. So you can see, like, as you talk about that iterative and reiterative process that is exploration. But I guess, what is your priority going to be then? Is this, north, south, and now we can see over in the east now, right? You're going back to new or what's old is new, I guess, in terms of historical targets there. But I mean, what will your target be in 2024, Claudia?
Well, if you look at the results from 2023, there are some obvious targets for follow-up work where, with relatively little work, we should be able to add size, and we're aiming to add zones with higher grades and find those. And that's the areas we talked about before, sort of in the southern part of the property, south, mid, add 15, 16, this very large zone, obvious follow-up target. Similarly, in the northern part of the property, where we had some exploration success last year at Man, and that's just less than a kilometer south of the gate zone, with a historical hole in the middle that had some copper in it. So that's also a very obvious target for follow-up work, a low-hanging fruit. So there will be certainly some areas like that we'll follow up on, just to add further size and add further high-grade zones. And last year we drilled some very long holes. The aim was to really show that mineralization extends to depth, that we do have large mineralized zones there. I think we ticked that box, so it's safe to expect that this year we'll have shorter holes on average, and we'll also focus on the near surface and higher grade near surface. That's really what will really move this project forward and will be a focus of this year's program. And in addition to sort of expanding existing targets, we now have a number of exciting new targets, and I think you can also expect a couple of holes into some of those where we have the potential for new discoveries, which is exciting as well.
Well, and then I guess the follow-up question I have, knowing, of course, I'm not going to bother wasting time asking you about kind of material content that you can't actually talk about until the news has been released. But maybe I'll ask you kind of on the more philosophical side, right? And Claudia, I'll pass this one off to you again. But this sort of idea that, how aggressive should you be since copper is hot again, then versus how cautious should you be considering the kind of the downswing in share price, and, as you said, expensive cost of capital right now. Maybe can you just discuss kind of the internal conversations you've had, maybe just defend your logic a bit on that front?
Well, I've talked about that side of things already a little bit before. It's all about finding the right balance between moving fast and moving smart, and then taking your shareholders and your share structure and your share price into account. And yeah, as I said, in a market like we have today, where share prices are quite low and equity markets are relatively weak, that's, I believe, not the time to do the most aggressive program in the company's history. So you have to find the right balance. And yeah, as I said, we will have a substantial program in place, and more details will be out soon.
And then maybe another one, and I guess maybe a quick aside, we are nearing the end here, and I'll wrap it up quick here so we don't stretch it too long. But if anybody has any questions, please put them into the chat, and I'll try to make sure that they get into the conversation here. But maybe kind of the same thing, Chris, and again, this is, it's a philosophical question, not something that you can actually provide a hard dated, a hard concrete answer for. But nevertheless, I think there's maybe value in people hearing just the logic and the way that you thought about it. But I guess maybe splitting up meterage, right? I mean, how do you choose how much to throw at a single zone or a single target or a single complex, right? I mean, do you spread things out and risk reducing your chances at a breakthrough discovery at any one target, or do you concentrate solely on your highest conviction ones? And again, what is, and of course the answer is going to be a balance to a certain degree, but what is the conversation? What are the conversations and metrics or meaningful kind of points that are considered in such a discussion?
Yeah, I'll happy to take that. Just if you hear banging, I've got a bunch of construction work going on in my basement, and they seem to be quite vigorously banging right now. So, um, I would say, like the way I look at that is, I would hope that people realize, like when we're doing all this exploration work on the project, it doesn't mean that we're not happy with the zones that we already know about. Like if we never found another zone on the project, I still think the project would be an excellent project. Like I think it has the potential that it needs based on the zones that we have. But you can't ignore the fact that you have all these other targets that are coming out, and including like, if you get, like, we have rock samples of like 0.6, 0.7% copper on surface within big soil anomalies with geophysical targets on them, which are untested and undrilled. So I would say what we want to be, because of the factors that Claudia mentioned around market conditions, is, people say, well, if I drill a 500-meter deep hole, does it, and it costs me $10, wouldn't that be lovely? Does it cost me $20 to drill a 1,000-meter deep hole? And it doesn't. It would cost you $30 or $40, right? So it's 3 or 4 times more expensive to do these really deep holes. So I would say what I'd rather see this year is more drilling that would be potentially useful for more advanced modeling work in the future. And then I'd like to see more targets tested. So I think we've proven with the drilling that we've done that we have kilometer deep porphyries. We don't need to show that again. What we would really like to do is focus on areas we think are going to generate good near surface grade and test these new targets. And that will be, I think, a difference in the program this year from what you've seen in the past. There'll be more focus, less of these really deep holes because the dollars are going to go further that way. And we need to test more targets and focus on the higher grades within the areas that we know about, right?
Good. Maybe I'll send this right back to you, Chris, and this will be my verify follow-up. Can you discuss, I mean, how many of your 2024 targets would you call kind of Kodiak? And of course, I know that there's the beauty of it is that it is kind of a both, right? Verify and Kodiak working together in terms of your AI modeling system. But how many of your 2024 targets were targets that, maybe I'll phrase it this way, were Kodiak generated prior to Verify coming on? And then how many were new because of Verify, if that distinction makes sense?
It does in a way. Most of the new targets are ones that we had previously generated, but the Verify is verifying, appropriately enough, that we have those targets. It did highlight a few new areas. We'll put out some news about that once the news is ready to go. But there are brand new targets that, quite simply because of the size of the property, we haven't had time to go to yet. So, or we have a little bit of prospecting, and lo and behold, Verify identified something that we were like, yeah, we do have either historical work, or we have copper in soils, or we have some grab samples or something that actually highlights those targets. But I have to say, there's a lot of data on this project now. It's hundreds of drill holes, and we've been working on it for 4 years. So we have a pretty good idea where these things develop. But surprisingly enough, Verify did come up with brand new targets that we just hadn't got around to those areas because the project is so big. It's basically a district scale project, right?
No, good. So just kind of a grab bag. We'll end it with a bit of a grab bag style of questions here. Just Claudia, can we expect a resource estimate for Gate Zone in the near term, and then why or why not to that?
Well, I can also give a bit of a philosophical answer to that, or sort of our strategy. Like from the start, our vision for MPD was that it is a large system with the potential to become big and potentially in the future, if our exploration is successful, a major mine. For that reason, it was never our strategy to come out with a small maiden resource early at the Gate Zone, because we've from the start thought Gate is only a small part of it. There is a whole lot more. And I think last year's exploration program highlighted that. So that's the reason why we haven't gone down the resource route at gate. What our strategy is will be to come up with a resource that really reflects the potential of the project as we see it. So as and when we come up with a resource, it will be a good one. And that's really the philosophy, I would say, behind it.
No, and I would amend that a little bit to say I don't think gate is small. It's just that there are so many zones around the project, and one of the things that the resource initially should contain is near surface mineralization as well, right? Gate's a big target. It's a kilometer long, a few hundred meters wide, and most of the grade begins at a couple hundred meters depth. A project like this, if it were in the hands of a major, they would never just develop one zone. It would be like there's no project in the world that's like this that has multiple porphyry centers, that it would be a one zone development scenario. So like Claudia said, it would behoove the company to come out with resources that are composite of many of these zones together. And that would show both potential operations like over a period of time as it sequences from open pits to underground and all that. Of course, that's all highly hypothetical at this moment. As we said, this is a philosophical answer to your question.
Mm-hmm. We look next door at Copper Mountain, which is geologically very similar to what we see at the MPD project. Several pits there, and they now have deeper drilling that also points to underground potential. I think that's a scenario that, if you look at MPD, could be very well what you'll see in the future at MPD as well.
Excellent, thank you. And then there's a couple of audience questions here. I think that'll be it, and we'll call it there. But maybe just a simple one here, right? I'll bounce back to this, right? You can see MPD North. Just someone asking when we might be able to expect just some work from Verify or the AI on the south end as well.
We'll be announcing more news soon regarding exploration plans, and that includes the whole property. So hold your horses.
Yeah, more news to come, eh? And then final one here, and then this is maybe a good question to end on too, because this was one that I decided to skip past myself. But how is your ongoing relationship with tech? And I guess the question here that's driving at is, how hands-on are they as a partner? Are you sharing expertise or in data, in training, and using Verify with them? And how does that relationship look?
Well, tech have been a very supportive partner from the start, and have not only participated in our placements and supported us with their investment, but also we've had close contact with their technical teams. They, of course, know the area very well because they have a big copper mine just 50 kilometers north of us. And they've certainly given us a lot of helpful input, and it's been a real pleasure working with them.
Good. Well, I think honestly that that does it for me. And I guess Chris or Claudia, any final thoughts that you wanted to maybe touch on before we say goodbye here?
Just there should be more news in the relatively near future, so I watch out for that. And we're always happy to chat about it. You and I speak more frequently, so I'm sure there's lots of topics we can get into as we get into the weeds about various things. So I'm always happy to chat whenever you want.
Likewise to the audience, if you have any questions, want to discuss further, don't hesitate to reach out via email or any other means. We're always happy to talk.
No, and I can attest to that. I know that Nancy and Chris and Claudia as well are responsive in their emailing. But I think that's it. We'll call it here shy of an hour. So yeah, thanks for your time, Chris and Claudia. Thank you for your answers and for your forthcoming responses. And everybody in the audience, thanks for being here. This is, I think we'll call it here.